Welcome to Ottawa and the Future of Sports. Today, we're bringing you an end-of-season interview with Carleton University's wrestling coach, Chris Schrauwen, following two major tournaments, the OUA Wrestling Championships in Sault Ste. Marie and the U Sports Wrestling Championships in St. Catharines. If you missed our first conversation with Coach Schrauwen and members of the team, check out Episode 5 of Season 1. Now, with these recent competitions behind them, let's get to the interview.
Okay, yeah, so we're in a championship season, the OUA Championships, which was at Algoma University, Sault Ste. Marie. So we brought 6 athletes down there. 5 of them qualified for U Sports, which was great. We brought home 2 medals, which was Jess Hong at 50 kilos and Heavenly Emo she competed at 68 kilos. Okay, so we had 2 medalists. Heaven brought home a silver medal, which was her first ever OUA medal, so that was pretty exciting. And Jess took home bronze. And then we continued on. We were at the U Sports Championship, which was held at Brock University, St. Catharines, which Jess brought home Carleton's first ever U Sports medal, bronze medalist, which was pretty exciting for us. That's a new ground, and in terms of like what we're building with a very young program, that's a big one for us to have that first medal at the U Sports level. So very exciting for us.
What does it mean for? We'll talk about the first tournament. Tell us, what does it mean to make the podium and get a medal there?
So OUA Championships is it's quite competitive. So for the wrestling competition, there's 11 universities that compete at the OUAs. They separate them into pools, and the top 5 qualify for U Sports. But in terms of medal, that's the top 3. So most of the athletes are wrestling 4 or 5 matches, right? In order to get a medal, you got to win almost all of them, right? So it's very competitive. Every team is putting in their best athletes. So some of these programs will have 2 or 3 different athletes that are good at one size, and they're putting forward their best athlete, right? So us as a smaller program, we're putting forward our core athletes, but some of these bigger teams, they're deep, right? So when you get to this tournament, it's not just you got to wrestle people, you got to wrestle every university's best athlete, right? So it's tough. So and it's quite meaningful when we do have somebody that wins 2 or 3 matches, gets through and finds themselves in those medal matches and pulls off the win. It's very exciting.
For you as a coach, as your athletes are progressing through the tournament, what's that one recurring thing you remind them about?
That's a good question. I'd say that it's different for each athlete, but I'd say
let's talk about Heavenly.
Heaven, I would say, so it's all about kind of managing the stress factors for Heaven, I would say. So when she's locked in and focused, she wrestles very, very well. OUA Championships, that was her first ever final match. You know what I mean? In terms of you're at a championship. You do the whole walk-in, they do the national anthem, they announce your name, and the room is loud, everyone's yelling. So
I'm getting nervous just hearing that, to be honest.
So that was so it was interesting. You could see the stress factors manifesting in different ways in somebody that hasn't experienced this before. So again, that communication factor of hey, how are you feeling? What do you need right now? And for Heaven, a lot of times is get out of the loud space for a little bit, right? Throw your headphones in, listen to whatever music, and having those control factors, right? One thing is I'd say so if there's a general thing I'd say I talk to all the athletes about, it's about controlling the factors you can. You can't control the fact that room is going to be loud, that everyone's going to be yelling, that there's going to be people cheering against you, perhaps in force, right? But the things you can control is how you're doing your warm-up, what is your routine, what is going through your brain, even if it is oh my god, I'm nervous, I'm stressed, how are you combating that? What is your response in your brain to that? And it can be different for different athletes, but controlling the factors leading up to those big matches is something we chat about a lot, for sure.
And speak to us. So she captured the silver medal, yeah? Speak to us about some of her matches.
Yeah, so OUAs, I would say it was a tough tournament for her. I'd say in both their preliminary matches, she fought, I'm trying to remember who she fought. It would have been Western, and then Guelph. So both tough athletes, both like really came after her. The Guelph one was quite close, and the Western one. So the Western one, she was challenging her upper body a lot. Heaven caught 2 big throws, but like it was a tough match. And then the second one, it was very tight as well. Like it came down to the late rounds. Heaven got just some tactical zone points and then finished the match strong. So those were really tough matches, I would say, that she managed well. And I think like one of the things me and Heaven talked about too is like as she's kind of like climbed the ranks this season, right? So last year she wasn't medaling at these tournaments, but now in the like preliminary, like the Open University tournaments, she's starting to be a recurring medalist, right? So she got a silver medal at the Brock Open, which was a big one. Like she was medaling at some of the other ones earlier in the season. So what you're finding now is the coaches are not just like sending their athletes out wrestling their normal plans. They're game planning for you now, right? Like they know your style, they know what you generally do. And you know, these universities that have good resources, they're trying to get their athletes to win. They're coming up with smart game plans to beat us, which is like, again, it's exciting, but it's also like as that athlete to like understand why are your matches getting tougher. Like it feels like your level's getting better. You know that you're improving, but like why these athletes that you were like maybe beating easier early in the season, why is it tougher now? And partially it is because like they're not just training to train, like they know who the best athletes are in the division, and one of them is Heaven, so they're game planning for you now, right? And we're doing the same for them, right? So it's having that like that ability to make those adjustments and to trust that like what we're doing is going to win out. What we are doing is going to, in the end, result in victory, right? Yeah.
Now speak to us about Jess.
So Jess, yeah. So both Heaven, I'd say, and Jess, like different paths for sure. So Jess has been with me a long time, since she's been wrestling in high school, and more of a veteran. Like she's been in a lot more big championship matches than a Heaven, per se. So that was, and I would say that was a factor for sure in the youth sports as well. That she's a little more used to the crowds, the noise, what comes in those big championship matches. Not that it's not a challenge for her. Like I said, like most athletes, she's still like there's a stress factor going into those finals. But there's I would say, me and Jess having worked together for a long time, like there's an understanding. Like you can come to me, we can chat. Like if you're feeling good, like tell me. If you're not feeling so good, tell me. We'll talk it out. We'll lay out what we're gonna do. And like having that trust and having that plan is really big when you're in those big matches. Again, just like controlling the factors you can control, like I said, is a big recurring theme for us. But also like, yeah, for Jess, I think it's just like she's been there before. She knows what the challenges are going to be, but just still having that routine, having that ability to manage those stress factors and perform anyways, right? I don't know if you want a question or you want me to continue.
Yeah, I'll just follow up in regards to her performance. Can you highlight some of her matches?
Yeah, for sure. So 50 kilos, I'd say, is one of the tougher women's categories right now. So I would say there's the top 3 that we kind of knew were going to be the top 3. Sam, I'm going to mess up her last name because it changed recently. She got married. It was Sam Romano, but I think it's now Sam Romero. Samantha Romero. There's Kaylin Young, and there's Jess. So those, I would say, like, are the recurring top 3 competitors in that division that have kind of been nationally competitive for a long time. But there's a bunch of like young up and comers that are like competitive right now. So one of the big ones, it was Jess's bronze medal match at U Sports, but it was also her bronze medal match at OUA's. Her name is Sienna Trotman. She's from Western, and she's been challenging those top 3. So I'd say not only was she a challenge for Jess, like the other ones, like she's catching throws on the top girls now too. And just like Western had a very good team this season. So and again, just like I said before, they're game planning now, right? Like Jess is a movement, snaps, looking for shots, like very speedy, aggressive shooter. So they were clearly trying to tie her up, drag her into an upper body throwing war, and quite frankly, it's a smart strategy that we had to kind of manage from our end as well. So that both in the OUAs and the U Sports, they were high-scoring matches that went back and forth depending on who was implementing the game plan and who was exposing the other person's mistakes.
In terms of that planning aspect, obviously other coaches are doing their homework and so on. Is it predominantly competitive competition footage that they're looking at, or is everything on, like, what are they looking at?
Yeah, so like we're kind of in a new time right now where like we have really good access to videos. Like, so I don't know specifically what other universities do, but I'm sure I'm doing video review. I'm sure other universities are also doing video review. Like, we bring our tablets to tournaments and we take our own film, but there is really good resources now at the like most university tournaments. They have a fellow down from London who films them all, and if you ask him like, hey, I want these matches after the tournament, he'll just send from the archive because he's just a supporter of the sport, right? Nice. So access to the videos for any tournament is very easy to get, so I'm sure most universities are doing that. Or again, like, it can just be whoever was the coach in that match is watching that match and goes to their athlete like, hey, this is what happened, here's what we're doing the next time around, you go back to practice. Like, that's generally how, if you're at a competitive level, you're doing it, right?
For sure. Is there access to stats as far as and I know there's some limitations, but in terms of statistics for big data sort of, you know what I'm saying? Because in other sports, we you know what I'm saying? Like, we have access to that, and I would imagine it would certainly be a huge advantage to have that sort of information. Is that available at this level of wrestling?
Yeah, I don't think it would be like, if you're talking about like this person scores this many points or has this many shots. Like I think there's basic results. Like, I remember looking up at U Sports, like, you can check an athlete, okay, this was their record this season. Right. So that kind of basic stats is there, but like the little specifics you're talking about, I haven't seen it at this level. The place I have seen it is when I was working with the national teams. Like, they do research to that level, which honestly, when I was exposed to it and I got access, like, was so cool to me. Right. Like, as a nerd of the sport that likes that stuff, and like how much of an advantage or like how much of an edge that gives you when you can, I guess, review to that level, right?
Maybe you should reach out to at Carleton to one of the data science folks and get them to kind of review all the footage and somehow create a data model to you know what I mean?
So that exists. So like that exists at like the club national level. They have guys that are on staff to do that, right? And that's like, it all comes down to resources, but like, there are people that is their job, and it is like, it's cool. It's a cool thing, but it's also like, it's a useful thing if you want to develop further. Yeah.
Is it available for coaches? Like, if the coach asks for that for those stats, would it be available, or is it restricted?
It's restricted. Okay. Yeah. So again, like,
sure.
Yeah. So when we had access, like, it was like the national teams are doing it so that they can give their national team members a competitive edge internationally, right? So they're researching our competition from different countries and saying like, hey, this athlete shoots this many, or they're more effective with this throw, like whatever. They're studying to give us coaches that data to help with our programming, which is, and again, it's smart, it's useful, but I don't think there's anything that's at the university level, at least not. Maybe other universities are paying a guy to do that, but
probably, yeah. It's fascinating.
It's possible, yeah.
It's really that information, I would imagine, from your perspective as a coach, is so valuable, right? Sure. Yeah. But I want to go back to, so after the OUAs, obviously we saw Carleton University Athletics put out that Heavenly was the athlete of the week. Mm-hmm. What did that mean for her, if you could, from your perspective, and also the program overall, to have, two athletes obviously make the podium at that tournament, but overall for the program, what does it mean, and for her, in your opinion?
Yeah, so that, I mean, obviously I think she was very excited about it, and in terms of like us and the team, like it's the more exposure we get, like the better it is for, like, and all of us, I would say, like, so me as the coach, obviously I want to grow the program, see more athletes come out and build, but like the team itself is committed to that too. We believe in what we're doing. We believe in the program here. So when we do see our successes, like it's nice that the university is recognized. Like, hey, like, you know, we did this thing. It's not an easy thing to get a medal at OUAs or U Sports in wrestling, and you know, we haven't been at it that long. So like for them to say like, hey, like we did this thing, check it out, and you know, hopefully more people will see that and be like, if they're interested in wrestling, maybe they've got a background in combat sports, they come out and join the team, and we start building up every year a little bit more. So yeah, so it's exciting to see that. There was we were actually at the basketball game yesterday. So the OUA women's basketball, they were recognizing us there too. So that was kind of neat too. They did a little honor ceremony where they brought us out and a few other teams that had medaled or done well OUAs and U Sports. So Heaven and Jess went out and with the medals they announced. So that's, again, like the more the universities say like, hey, we recognize your accomplishments and put us in the spotlight, like I think it's going to be better for us to build in the future for sure.
Absolutely. Did they post anything on social media? Because I follow CU Carleton. Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot. Did they post about? Were there any pictures or anything like that?
I'm honestly not entirely sure. Like I said, those two, the thing that you mentioned there, like I remember the athlete of the week, so that went up for sure.
Right.
And I know like we were
at the ceremony yesterday. There's no video of that or anything.
I'm not. I gotta have to look.
Okay.
Yeah, possible it is, but I'm not sure.
Fair enough. What, in your opinion? So obviously it's great for the program, as you mentioned, and you guys are championing the program. You're trying to promote the program for a sport that you care for. What would you say is that wrestling literacy, if that term even exists, within Ottawa and particularly Carleton University circles? Has it increased? Is there a knowledge of wrestling as far as a sport, and you know what I mean, like in terms of following and understanding what's going on? Because for folks, for people, generally there's always kind of a learning curve when trying to kind of understand the sport. If it's badminton, if it's, you know, fill in the blank. But wrestling is probably something, if they have no context to grappling sports or combat sports, pardon me, and grappling sports, it might go over their head. Well, what are your thoughts on the quote unquote wrestling literacy in Ottawa, broadly speaking, and more specifically at Carleton?
Yeah, so I would say it's growing, but like obviously I'd say probably some gaps there still. One of the, I would say Carleton over the last years, like we've been really, I feel like every year we get a little better at kind of, we're communicating our needs, what we kind of need for us to be competitive, and what we need from the university. And I feel like every year they're kind of recognizing like, hey, these guys are doing well. They're like, we give them a little bit of resources and they seem to continue doing well. So that's been improving, and that's like a really good thing for us to see. But it's
sorry, I meant at the fan level.
Like the fan level.
Yeah, I know the institution obviously supports it, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But I meant more at the general fact, because the Ravens are very involved with basketball, right?
Yeah.
You see the fans out there, like they have the flock and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
I'm just curious to know, in terms of wrestling, what's the status on that?
In Ottawa, it's we have, I'd say, like a cult following would maybe be like the best way to put it. So like there's
that's good though.
Yeah. Like I would say like there's certain people that are like true wrestling fans in the city that like, you know, will shoot me messages or will post when we like win things, and like, and that's really like cool. It's kind of like one of the things that's tough is it's not a lot of competitions in the city, right? So, and I say that's always been true, right? Like every once in a while we'll host a big event like a nationals or something like that. But in terms of like the university scene, like a lot of times we're on the road, so we'll post the videos, we'll like announce our results, and there's people that follow it and are interested in it. But it's hard for, I'd say, the local people to like see what we're doing on a regular basis, and that's, I'd say, just that's always been a bit of a challenge. I'm hoping like we're not quite there yet, but maybe in the future if Carleton can host some things, like I think that's part of how you get that fan base, right? Like come watch, come see what we're doing. But I think it's like because we're on the road, like it's got to be more in the social media and the sharing. That's how you got to do it, I guess, right?
From your time on the road exploring, you know, other cities in Canada, and as far as, you know, tournaments and so on, which city, in your opinion, has a real, like a very wrestling educated fan base that like really shows up for tournaments?
St. Catharines of Brock, probably number one, right? They've had the best team titles. They're winning every year almost. When they do host their events, like all their alumni, they do events, they all show up. So in general, that's your place that's hosting a lot, and that's your place that tends to fill up the stands with their own people when you do come down, right? Which was certainly a factor when we were there for the U Sports. But even if you just go to their open tournament, because they host one every year, right? Like you're gonna be surrounded by their fan base, by their athletes, by their alumni, and they care, right? They care about
their
wrestling,
volunteer, their community. That
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that certainly helps when you're trying to build for the future. Yeah.
I think another thing that helps is the event you spoke of yesterday. Recognizing the two athletes on the team. It elevates the especially at that game. Because Carleton University and the Ravens, they love their basketball, the men's and the women's basketball. Excellent team. Excellent teams. Pardon me. And the fact that they highlighted wrestling. I'm sure a few people in the crowd were like, "Oh wow, I didn't know Carleton had wrestling." And it generates interest, and maybe it'll get people considering trying out the sport. I want to move on now to U Sports. If you could talk to us about the tournament experience there, and I believe it was broadcasted on CBC Gem. It was streamed on CBC Gem, the U Sports, which is a big deal for in terms of accessibility of content. I think that's one of the challenges with some of these sports. Sometimes you don't know where to find the content, but they put it on that international platform. Pardon me, it's a big win for the sport. Tell us about U Sports and the team you sent.
Yeah, so U Sports exciting tournament. They've got like the way it was set up, like the pool matches makes for a long tough day the first day, and then you kind of need to regroup for those championship matches the next day. So it's a different kind of challenge, I'd say, than some of the other ones during the season where you wrestle one day and then it's done, right? So it has that bit of championship feel to it. A lot of the top international tournaments, that's the way it's done too, right? You have your preliminary matches in the first day, and then the second day is those final matches with the highlight with the stands, which is kind of the way it was at U Sports. So that was kind of it was a cool thing to be a part of. The way it was just set up, run, the atmosphere there was it was intense for sure. People
intense in a good way.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say just not we talked a little bit about Brock. Sure, they had their alumni events. They had a lot of fans out there, but there was a cheering crowd for Lakehead. There was a big group from Alberta, and you could see them in their different section, and you would hear them right when their athletes were up. You would hear these people supporting and cheering. So it was a fun thing to be a part of, even if sometimes you were in that match and you felt like there was a lot of people cheering against you. It's still cool that people are there and people care and people are cheering, right?
They're invested.
For sure, exactly. And I would say one of the things we saw at U Sports, not just our athletes but other athletes, there were a lot of upsets. There were a lot of matches where you're I've seen those two wrestle this season. It usually goes the other way, but today that person got the match, right? And I think you saw a lot of that because the pressure was at a different level, right? It was loud. There was a lot of cheering. There was team title implications for some of the athletes that I'm sure they were feeling too. So it was exciting. It was fun to be a part of.
How did your athletes do?
Yeah, so again, the big one we're advertising because it's exciting for us. Jess with her bronze medal was a very good one. Heaven lost her bronze medal match, so she placed fourth, which it was a tough finish because she was winning her bronze medal match and then lost at the very end to somebody she's beaten a few times this season. But still, for her, this is only her second year competing for us, right? So for her to come fourth in the country is still very, very good. I'm trying to think of the other results here. I believe Ziad placed sixth. I had Iffy placed seventh, and Vlad would have been eighth. So everybody, for the most part, was winning matches, but there was definitely some stiff competition coming from out west. Alberta had a very good team. There were some good athletes, especially on the women's side from Calgary. And you got Concordia doesn't have a huge team, but the ones that they do bring tend to be very tough too. So, so tough tournament. The athletes, for the most part, I think we were happy with the overall performances. Definitely some matches we're looking back we could have won those ones, but I think that's any tournament, right? And again, when you're talking about the atmosphere and how to compete and how to handle that pressure, there's no substitute for the experience. And I think when you look back on this and you sort of Jess did get the big win in the bronze medal match, and I think some of that is just she's been there before, right? It's everybody's gonna struggle with those nerves to a certain extent, but one of those things is sort of there's only so much you can say, coach, do. You need to go through it. You need to experience it as an athlete, and then I guess reflect personally on how do I approach this? How am I going to perform my best under these conditions, right?
What are some of Chris? What are some of the unique challenges for wrestlers who are competitive wrestlers, and that people may not be fully aware of? Because I don't want to say it's a unique sport, but if you're unaware of this sport and you're looking at it, and because you described an interesting scenario here, the pressures, the psychological factors of competing, where all eyes are on you. You're on a national platform. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? It is a big deal, and this is obviously it's an Olympic sport, right? It's an international sport. It might not be very popular in Canada, but it's very popular elsewhere, all over the world, quite frankly. The question I'm asking, if you were to identify a unique challenge for wrestlers, what would that be?
Yeah, so obviously the actual competitive sport part, it's a very physically demanding sport. They're short matches, right? So the total competition time for a match, if it goes the full length, it's 6 minutes, right? So 3-minute round, little break, 3-minute round, with some stoppage time. Maybe you're on the mat maximum 10 minutes, but you're there for the full day. So one of the biggest challenges is sort of on any given day, you got 4 or 5 matches where you've got to lock in, compete hard for 10 minutes, and then somehow you've got to calm down in between, because you can't be there for say we're there at the beginning of the day from 8 to 5 or whatever, right? You can't lock in 8 or 9 hours and be focused. You shouldn't. It's not you're going to be mentally exhausted by the end of the day. So you have this weird challenge where you've got to, when your match is up, you got to warm up, you've got to get in the right headspace to fight somebody at a high intense level, and then you got to do your cool down, and then you got to find a way to settle down and calm your brain in between. And that's it's unique, and it's something different athletes will handle very differently. And that's, I'd say, part of the personal aspect of coaching and learning the sport for those athletes too, is just how you should manage your day might be very different depending on personality types. Are you an outgoing person? Are you an introvert? What is a calm, relaxing time for you? And how do you find that in a day that is kind of, in a sense, chaos, right? It's a long day. You're gonna fight people a few times in between, but then you tend to have this downtime in between where it's important how you spend it and what you're doing to get your mind in and out of that combat mentality, I guess.
And you're probably even injured, right? And it's, or you know what I mean? You're hurt. It's a combat sport. You may be having, an injury or two, and you have to deal with all that.
Yeah. So a lot of times, hopefully you're not competing with an injury. Sometimes it's happened if you're at that level. We did have some little things come up, but it's also generally speaking, everybody's got something that's sore, right? The training that you're doing for wrestling, if you're doing it and you're competing at that level, probably you're not going in feeling, my body feels 100% great, right? You try, we will try to taper and train in such a way that hopefully you feel I feel great going into this, coach, but chances are nothing's ever perfect, right? So you're right. Yeah, that's you might be managing, and then you're like, okay, like in between your matches, go do your physio stretches, like in between. Like a lot of them will just go do a cool down. There's bikes there. Sometimes they'll hop on the bike, but yeah, and that might be an additional factor to everything else that's going on for sure.
What would you say are your top 2 or 3 takeaways from this season? As the coach, what are lessons learned that you want to kind of maybe refine the process, or it could be anything. I'm looking for like 2 or 3 major things that you learned from this season. And it's a team. It's an individual sport, but it's a team as well, which is an interesting sort of dynamic. I'm going to ask a follow-up in regards to that individual team sort of phenomenon, but dynamic in the sport. So it could be one thing, it could be 2 things, it could be 3. If you can kind of give us, I know it's a big question, so please do take your time. And the reason why I'm asking is I'm sure every match you saw something that was interesting. Maybe there's something in particular you want to focus on in the new year, or in the new season. I'm just curious to know if there's anything you can share with us, or you don't have to. If you know.
No, I'm gonna think like it's a good question. What you said there specifically, team versus individual. I think that's like, it's always going to be a challenge, but I think that's something I'm still learning to manage at a university varsity level. And it's partially unique at this level because there is only, your team can only send 1 per weight category. So I'd say just in terms of like, okay, I start a season, I've got a certain amount of athletes. Sometimes you have some athletes that are close in weight, and you got to make that decision. And like, how are you going to make that decision? I'm like, okay, these 2 girls that are close in size, and you need them to be training partners. You need to be working together. But there's also this aspect later in the season, if they both maybe want the same spot, like you've got to find a way to manage it so they can still be good training partners and support each other when there's also a competitive factor to it. Again, we're at the stage where like, the team is still relatively small, so we didn't see a lot of challenges like that, but just, I would say, it's just something I'd say I need to like refine, like personally as a coach. How do I approach that so I keep those athletes, because you need those athletes that are close in size and weight and hopefully competitive level to push each other, to help each other achieve the best that they can, while also kind of managing like, there's a competitive factor to them that maybe they both want the same spot. It's unique. I feel like I'm still learning that. Like, how do I, and it's not just the, like I kind of explained, like you can have, like you need them to train together, and then there's maybe that battle for that spot, but also like, how do you keep them supporting each other down the line? Because it's tough, right? Like, it's like how you, sorry, I feel like I'm trailing off. I wasn't maybe.
Well, no need to apologize. I think anyone who's listening is listening to a very mature coach highlighting the reality of competition, of a competitive sport, weight-based sport. You know what I mean? Where this is a common thing in many other combat sports that you know what I'm saying? Where people, but it's I appreciate your honesty and highlighting that reality, of course. Sorry, did you want to elaborate?
I'm going to follow up on that a little bit. So like, I'd say one of the things we were having near the end of the season is we would have some athletes that would be dropping off, right? So that was something I guess what maybe I was alluding to a little bit there. Like, I near the end of the season, so I say there's maybe a lot of factors. One is like the break after Christmas, I feel like, and the switch in semesters, which is kind of in the middle of the season. So I'd say that in terms of me managing a university program, that was a bit of a challenge. And then in terms of like, again, my core athletes, which is, I could say, the ones you're seeing at OUAs and U Sports, like, not they're the ones I expect to go. But in terms of my athletes that are like, okay, maybe not everyone's there because, they're gunning for a U Sports or OUA medal. Maybe they're there because, you know, they like the sport, they like to compete, and I want to keep those athletes like involved on the team, you know, and excited to compete with the team at OUAs and U Sports, even if, you know, maybe they're not the most competitive athlete, or maybe they're not like really there because they want their goal is to win in OUAs or in U Sports, but they're there training, they're good athletes.
And they're part of the team.
And they're part of the team for sure. So that was like, again, I'm not even sure I have an answer to that right now, but I've been reflecting on that because I did have, I'd say, a bigger team leading up to the OUAs and U Sports, and trying to figure out what those motivating factors, like how do I motivate those athletes to want to be there for because like we want them there. We like they're part of the team. They're working hard. And, you know, like I kind of mentioned, there's, you know, there can be clashes of weight categories, but it's also, it wasn't always that either. It was just sort of, I'd get things like, oh, like, you know, this semester's hard, or like, I'm not sure I'm ready. I'd hear those answers, that would come up a lot, that I'm not sure I'm ready, when, you know, we look at it as sort of like, you've been training all season, you've been competing all season, you know. The worst that happens is, you know, you lose some matches, right? But in my mind, I was like, there's nobody that was at practice regularly and was competing. Like, the rules for OUAs and U Sports is you got to compete twice in the season. So in my mind, at least if you've competed a couple times at this level, like, you know, generally speaking, you've been training, like you're ready to compete. And I'm looking at some of the other universities. I'm like, okay, like, maybe these ones that aren't as serious and competitive aren't winning medals, but like, yeah, they could probably beat off some of the smaller universities in some of the other categories and win us some team points. And like, I guess that's maybe the question is like, how do you get them to be excited about that? Like, what, like, to want that? Like, as you look at the bigger teams, like your Brocks, your Westerns, and like, you know, they have their star athletes, but they also have up and comers or just athletes that you can tell are just like happy to be there and support the team, you know, like even if they're not the best ones on the team, right? So it's a challenge, and I feel like this may be the first year I was experiencing that challenge. I think in our infancy as Carleton, we're coming up and we're trying to just build the program, get the name out there, and we had more this year that I feel like maybe I could have done a better job keeping them involved, and I'm reflecting on how, I guess.
Are you sharing notes with other coaches from other other universities in terms of asking for their advice or their experience in this sort of with this scenario, because maybe they've experienced that?
No, it's probably a good point. Like, I mean, I do chat with a lot of the other university coaches at tournaments, but I feel like I haven't had a whole lot of time since the season to just like reflect and talk. Like, for me, in season, it's more like I'm doing my best to keep everybody involved, but like my main focus is like the ones that are in practice, right? And I think that's always been my perspective. Like, even if I have a small team, if you're in practice, you tell me you got goals, like, you're gonna be my focus. And maybe that's I think that I'm thinking about too is like maybe I need another coach where they're more focused on the second, like the other athletes, right? Maybe the ones that are there more for the team aspect or the, you know, the social aspect of the sport, because I think my focus does always need to be on that core committed crew.
Sure.
But like, I think that's like, in terms of my resource management, like getting, and I guess maybe it doesn't always have to be the coaches, it can be the student athletes. Like, I feel like you have to find people with talents in different places and give them those roles to push the team in the right direction. It's not just about getting the core athletes to a certain level. Like, I feel like in terms of growing the program, there's other ways to push the team forward that I feel like I need to get the right people in the right positions.
This is a fascinating topic right now because there's so much more I could ask, and I don't want to, you know, I know we're how much time? been almost 40 minutes, and we're going on here, but I'll keep it short because I don't want to take up more of your time. I do appreciate everything you're saying. How does I don't know if we're done talking about youth sports, but I'll ask this general question. Like I'm an alumni of that university. You're an alumni as well, right? Obviously, how do we support this program and its athletes? I'm asking as an alumni and also, whatever, combat sports fan, if you want to call me that. Like, how do we support?
Yeah, good question. I'd say like exposure like this is great, and I think like the more we get our name out there, the more we let people know that this is going on. Like, and I think what we've seen over the last years is that steady growth. Like, that's the main thing, right? Like, is just letting people know there's a team, letting them know like, hey, we're competitive, we're doing big things at the OUA, at the U Sports level, so that we can get more people involved, I guess, right?
Who's your key target audience outside of the athlete in the one who he or she wants to compete and push themselves and has goals and objectives? Who's your other audience that you need to kind of support the program and its athletes and the coaches, etc.?
I would say if there's one area I'd hope to like get more exposure for, it would be the local Ottawa high school, like, and I'd say the greater high school scene in general. So I'd say if you look at the more successful university programs that are, I'd say, in the GTA area, but also like, you're talking about St. Catharines, London, when you go to their tournaments, you'll see the local high school kids like watching or like volunteering, doing score clocks or whatever, right? So they grow up seeing this, and that's, I think, one of the things like we need to see more of. Like the Ottawa high school, like there's a big scene where they wrestle and they compete, right? What I would like to see more of is just like getting it out to them. So like I know like for me, as just a fan of the sport, like before I was coaching at this level, like when the OUA's U Sports would come on, like me and my friends, which are like other coaches or whatever, we would sit down, we would watch those finals. It was exciting, like you get it together and you'd throw that on the TV on the stream and you'd watch, and it would just be, it was cool. Like you said, a CBC covered it this year. To watch wrestling be like highlighted like that, and also like you've got commentators that are talking, which is again like just cool, and like I think that's needed more at the grassroots level to kind of like see like, hey, there's a bigger world out there, right? Mm-hmm. Like like a lot of these kids that are in these sports, like they grow up watching like UFC, for example, right? They're watching mixed martial arts, and a lot of them are getting involved in training because they saw that and they saw it and they're like, that's cool, right? So in my mind, you want to see those kids growing up and like watching those OUAs, watching those U Sports, and being like, hey, that's cool. We, our local Carleton team did this, right? And that could be me, right? I could, go do my university here, get myself a degree, but also like I could be on that stage and other people could be watching, right? And that's cool, right?
At the grassroots level, you mentioned at the high school level now in Ottawa, give us, the sort of temperature right now. Is Ottawa's high school scene, is it thriving?
Yeah, so I would say like it goes up and down. I'd say like if we talked previously, I think we talked about this too, like we took a hit over COVID, right? So that happened. I think from what I've seen over the last few years, like it's on the rise. There's new programs that have been starting up at the high school level, so that's great. This year, one of the cool things they did more of, and you might enjoy this as a fan of the sport, we're seeing more dual meets, which like is it's more of like a school versus school competition, and they're doing this as like fundraisers, right? So that was really neat. Like I went to watch a couple of these just because I had athletes I was training that were competing there. So but like just as a fan of the sport, you can show up, in the evening after work, pay a ticket price, get some baked goods or whatever, and then watch like on a highlight stage match, school versus school, and they get into it too, right? Like all the kids are there watching, they're cheering for their schools. So that was kind of a cool thing we saw this year. And there's new programs that have started. Like we've helped support a few of these programs by donating mats or whatever. So you're seeing development, and we've got a few more that have started to join the club. Right about now is a big recruitment time for us. Like at the end of the high school season, the OFSA season, you're trying to engage those athletes that say they want to do well at OFSA. They see the OFSA, maybe they made it this year, or maybe they just missed out at cities, and they say, hey, that's my goal. And we want to see them coming out and be like, okay, like if you say that's your goal, you need to mean it, right? Like in terms of like, and when I tell athletes this too, like you don't just win OFSA by wanting it. You know what I mean? Like, so one of our high school athletes did just win. That's Dexter Bates, which is another maybe conversation, but he was one of those athletes that just came from high school, said like, hey, these are my goals, whatever. And then he just put in the work, right? Mm-hmm. And so I would say if there's one thing I'm hoping to see more, like we're seeing the growth in the high school level in Ottawa. We're hoping to see more of that like connection to the clubs, right? Like, like the Ottawa high school scene is great. It exposes you to the sport at that local level. But we want to see those athletes that like really mean like, hey, I want to do big things in the sport. I don't just want to win city championships. I want to win provincially. I want to win nationally, and we want to see those kids connected with the club where we do produce that level of competition.
Fascinating. I know we're going a bit over here, but just a few more questions in terms of that idea of wanting to reach higher goals.
Yeah.
How much are parents involved in that in terms of encouraging? Like, what instills those ideas of thinking bigger about the sport in terms of that competition stream?
Yeah, it's an interesting. I think I get athletes for different reasons and different levels of parents' involvements. Like, I would say the good. I want to say good, like quotation marks. The good competition wrestling parent, like it's a very tricky balance to find. But I would say I get athletes who I meet their parents, I shake their hands maybe once or twice at the beginning of the season, and then I rarely see them. The kid shows up and it's very self-motivated. So, and I've seen success in both. I've seen success in kids where their parents come to every tournament, they've got a cooler packed full of snacks, and they're supporting big time. And then I'd see athletes where, their parents are, at home, or they're working, or like, a lot of times they've got other things going on. Yeah. Or I also see there's times where the kids will tell me, I get too nervous, I don't want my parents watching. And they'll tell their parents like, stay at home, please. Sure. and a lot of them, that's just sort of like, it's what the kids have told them. So you see a wide range of this, but I'd say certainly like having that parent support, and the parent support could just be as simple as like, you like this thing, I'm gonna throw you the money so you can go to competitions. I'm going to make sure your bags are packed, you're well fed, that sort of thing. Like we're gonna keep healthy food around the house so you can train and eat and recover and all that. And some of them it is they're road warriors and they're traveling down with them to all the tournaments. So you see a wide range, but like having that support from home is big for sure.
How is the sport affordable for folks?
Yeah, I'd say wrestling, like certainly at National Capital Wrestling and like Carleton as well, like we try to keep it as affordable as possible, right? So in terms of what you need for the sport, it's a pair of shoes, and like in the practice room it's just shorts and t-shirt, but like a singlet, and that's it, right? Like, so we do get a lot of low income athletes, which we're very like proud of, and I would say it's one of the areas I'd say I get my best athletes from. Like, like it's nice when you have a lot of money and support, that it makes a difference for sure. But the low income athletes, like, they do well, and I think it is like
is it potentially, sorry to interrupt, is it an untapped potential stream of athletes? I say this because obviously hockey is very expensive, right?
Yes.
Like if you have young kids, hockey is very expensive. All these various other sports are very expensive, but
Yeah.
could that be an interesting audience or potential stream of athletes and competitors?
Yeah, like I would say maybe not completely untapped because we do get them through the doors quite often. But if I was to say, yeah, like it's a group I would like to engage. I would like to see them come out and like have that understanding that like it doesn't require a lot of money to get good at this sport, right? Like we spend a certain amount of money traveling, going to tournaments, but like compared to like a hockey or a football, for example, like we're not playing the same game. We're not talking thousands of dollars every year. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Last question. Two last questions, I promise. Is it a team sport or an individual sport? And where do we draw the line? And the last question, not draw the line, but is it, in your opinion, is it more of a team sport or individual sport? And what's your vision when you look at wrestling? Ideally, is it more team, individual? Last question for you is in regards to what's next for you as far as obviously the end of the university season, right? What's going on now? It's springtime. I believe it's March. Is it March? Yeah, it's March. I can't even think. It's springtime. What's happening?
Okay, so we'll talk about the first one first. So versus when you're talking between team or individual, like it is both. It's when it comes down to competition, and this is actually something we say a lot. Like when it comes down to competition day, we tell athletes to be selfish to a certain extent, right? Like leading up in the practice room, the team is really important, and like having the team behind you in your matches is important. But when it comes down to the actual match, it's an individual sport, and even So this is when I'm gonna bring up a story because I think it's relevant to what your question is, if it doesn't answer it directly. But a lot of our team meetings will chat before these tournaments, and it's about what do you need from the team the next day. So like if we're having our competition or OUAs or U Sports, we'll chat in the room and we'll talk generally to each individual athletes, but we're in the room together. Be like, what do you need from the team? What do you need from the coaches? So that you can be selfish tomorrow, so that you can focus on you and what you need, and then we try our best to manage it. We'd also do things like who's warming up with who, what do you want, and like we teach the athletes to a certain extent to be okay or like allow themselves to be selfish, and that like and to also not take offense. Like if I say, hey, I would prefer to go with this athlete in my warm-up tomorrow, or I would prefer you guys don't talk to me tomorrow, or I would prefer this, and it's always not like a personal thing. It's like, this is how I need to feel to perform my best, and to be comfortable telling that to your team. Like that requires a certain level of trust that's important. So that's, I'd say, where it ties in all together is to feel comfortable enough to communicate your needs, even if like, oh, I don't want to like offend this person, or I don't want to like to think I don't like them. Like to have that ability to be truly honest with what you need personally, even if it's like, oh, it's gonna ruffle this person's feathers if I say I like training with this person more. To be truly honest, to be able to say that, and then to go back to the room and still be friends. That is a tricky balance to find, and it's something we talk about a lot, and I'd say it's something we're still working on for sure.
And this is amongst the core competitor types?
For sure, yeah, like core competitor, but like in going into big tournaments, big competitions, and that's not just university level. Let's say like at every level, finding that balance between team and individual, and you will see like there's a difference in terms of what you're developing in the room, who is the best in the room and who is the best in competition day. And that's where like you do need both, but on competition day it's an individual sport. So you like, but you can't have one without the other. So if I can kind of like circle back on this point, if you're the type that's like, okay, I'm an individual athlete. This is my own competition, but you can't get along with people in the rooms, and you're not gonna train. You're not gonna get better. You might perform to the best of your ability on that day, but you won't be pushing your level in the practice room if everybody hates you and nobody wants to train with you. And on vice versa, if you're the person's a people pleaser, like, everybody loves you in the practice room, you're training, you're getting better, but you don't know how to lock in for yourself on competition day, you'll be a great training partner, but you're never going to achieve your top level.
Wow.
That makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's I'm hearing you share this, and I must say, I think hearing from a coach and coaches in general is always fascinating, because you have that insight, that awareness of dynamics amongst the team and the respective sport, and the need to communicate one's need to the teammates, and how important that is, especially I think when we think of leadership roles, coaching, I'm not a coach, I'm just listening and observing. Coaching seems like a tough job, you know what I'm saying? I mean, because you're juggling so many different fascinating objectives. You have one goal, to win, or maybe more than one goal. You have a set of goals, but you know what I'm saying? There's a lot there going on, and I think the more people hear from coaches in long form interviews, I think the more they can appreciate the challenge that comes with leading a team of individuals in any sport. Sorry, I'm rambling again, but no, this is incredible stuff, man. I think I had one last question in terms of looking ahead, unless you wanted to say something else.
Yeah, I would say, if I can follow up on that too, the way I look at it in terms of my own coaching, I think I've been involved in this for so long because I don't feel like I've ever gotten it right, or I feel like I learn something new every year, and that, again, I'm relatively new to the university coaching scene, and it is different coaching that age group versus high school, which I feel like I got more experience coaching high school, but now I'm coaching more at the university level, and it's a very, I'd say, challenging environment to have these, I'd say, slightly more developed athletes, right, in terms of who they are as people. They're young adults, and trying to manage all these personalities and get the very best out of each individual one. When you talk about team versus individual, that's my goal, is to get as many of my athletes to those major competitions, and then once they're there, have each of them individually perform to the best of their ability, and I'm trying to manage my own involvement in that to come with that result, and it's tricky, and I analyze that a lot personally. Am I making the right calls? Am I saying the right things? Am I managing the team properly? And that's, I'd say, when you're talking about off season, what I'm thinking about is where did I make the right decisions? Where did I maybe make mistakes? What do I need to learn to improve that for next year? Because I wouldn't say I got it perfect this year. So I'm constantly trying to reflect personally and decide how I can do that better for someone who's still, I'd say, learning to coach at that level, and the dynamics and challenges of a university program and competition season.
I must say I really appreciate your openness and honesty on this, because I know there's a lot there in terms of exploring and reflecting and sharing. I think as listeners to this podcast, I think we you know what I mean, we appreciate, we can hear that, and we can certainly appreciate it. And also, this is a sport you love, and you're doing what you enjoy. And seeing it from the perspective of a coach is always fascinating. Last question for you: what's obviously the season's over for the university athletes. What's on the horizon now in the spring?
Yeah, so I'm honestly like, yeah, it's been a busy and crazy season, so I'm kind of looking forward to we've reduced our practice numbers just a little bit, so our on-campus practices are done for the season. I'm still coaching about 3 times a week, which for me is a reduced schedule. So I'm going to kind of take it slow for the next few weeks, and then we're kind of going to be ramping back up. There is some other provincial competitions at the club level, and ultimately some national championships that some of the individual athletes are shooting for. So there'll be a competition, I'm trying to remember the exact dates, but I believe it's in May in Edmonton is going to be the national trials. So for some of the club athletes, that's going to be the goal for the end of the season. And then there's also summer games. It's a summer games year, so some of the high school kids are looking to perhaps qualify for Team Ontario. That'll also, I believe, be in May. And after that, depending on how our athletes do, there may be additional tournaments like your international Pan Ams or the Canada Games, which is going to be, I believe, in August in St. John's, Newfoundland. Yeah. So that's what's next. A little bit of slow time before we start ramping up again for the club big competitions at the end of the season.
Well, thank you very much for this interview. I'm going to be I'm hoping to have you guys on more for this podcast, because I really want to kind of focus in on the sport, particularly the work you guys are doing. So thanks again for this interview, and I know it's been it's almost an hour long now, so thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
That wraps up our end-of-season chat with Coach Schrauwen. Just to update you on the vote we mentioned in episode 5, a few months back, the Carleton community voted in favor of expanding the university's sports and training facility. A great development for students and for Ottawa. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more conversations on the future of sports.